everybody. Welcome to Justice Served Daily. And let me pop this up right here. Hello, Anya.
Hi, JSD. How are ya?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Heck of a day. I'm doing pretty good.
I let me just say I appreciate, even with continued breaking news all the time. I was starting to take it personally. It's like, why are all the damn Delphi developments happening when I'm trying to have Anya on my show?
They're like figuring out when we're talking, and then they're like, "Let's file that day." We don't want
Exactly,
to get
exactly.
together. It'll be too much chaos.
Exactly. It's so crazy. I mean, we go for such a period of time that nothing happens forever, and then boom, here we go.
Yes, it always is like that. It's either a drought or a flood.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you coming on and being here. I have been so excited, and I know I had announced to the group about we were trying to get this done last week, and everybody should know that I sent a text to Anya when I saw about the court hearing that was scheduled, and I was like, I know, we
I
need
feel
to
so bad.
reschedule. It's okay. So,
I was like,
um, and Kevin is working in the background trying to get a show done for you guys that you've been working on for the latest and greatest of the news and stuff. So,
he may come in as a special guest surprise at some point. So
oh,
he may come in.
wow.
He wants to be involved, but yeah, there's, as you know, breaking news today in Delphi about the lawyers. So
Right, right. Well, let me go through my notes, and I've been trying to keep track of some questions for people who I know who weren't going to be here live but wanted to have a question. And then I know you guys in chat are going to want to have questions. I'm hoping that as I go through some of the dialogue with Anya, we'll answer a bunch of your questions. So maybe that'll help narrow down some of them. But um, if you are new watching my channel, um, and if you're not, you'll know that I am a huge fan of the Murder Sheet. I call them my heart to heart couple. And if you don't know who that is, then you're younger than me, obviously. Um, but uh, you know, Anya, to kind of just share with the background, because I think that's important for people to realize that um and I say this counting myself in this statement I'm going to make. They're not just, people who just jumped on a podcast and that's kind of it. Because you have professional experience in this because you were an investigative journalist and that was your background, was doing stories and all that kind of stuff.
I did some investigative journalism, but you give me too much credit. I was very much on the retail beat, although I did do some investigations, which I'm proud of. But
Right.
I was always embarrassed when people that back then called me an investigative journalism a journalist, because I'd be like, I've done some good pieces, but I feel like you have to be doing that all the time. But it gave me like the tools, and
Oh
that
yeah.
was
I mean,
important.
you can tell that because you're really good at that. And when you question people and stuff and I love that if you have not listened to the podcast, you really have to listen to it because she is so descriptive in any show she's doing. And I love that. Right. I absolutely love that. And like, I want her to read books for me that would put me to sleep. Right. Like, she would relax you and so visually tell you what everything looks like. And she's just so, right. It's just in there. So anyway, but so you've had that background. And then Kevin, uh, he is an attorney,
Yes.
and you guys ended up meeting because of a case, a connection with the Burger Chef case. And that's kind of how the whole Murder Sheet podcast kind of got together, kind of after you guys got together. So the first pressing question is, who asked out who first? Was it you? Was it Kevin? Was Kevin stalking you? Come on, you can tell us the truth. He's not here right now, so
I'm
you can
here.
tell us the whole honest.
I can just tell you everything. And also, I just want to say before I say anything, JSC, we're such a huge fan of you and the work you've done advocating for kids and just keeping online predators in the spotlight so we can learn more about them and combat them. I just want to,
Yeah,
you're the
thank you so
best.
much.
So happy to
You
be
make me
here.
cry.
Oh, no, we're a huge fan of you too. And we just want to say, thank you for doing what you do. So who asked who out first? So Kevin and I were one of those, we were like talking, before I did my article on the Burger Chef case, and then we kind of just stayed in touch afterwards. And we would always talk, and we would talk a lot. I think he figured out that we liked each other before I did, because I was just like, oh, we're just like best friends who talk all the time and text all the time, and like
Yeah.
are constantly obsessed with one another. And over time, I think we both had that realization, but I think he realized it first. And then at some point he was like, let's try to make something happen. And I was like, yeah.
And that was long distance because he was he in Indiana at that time still or no?
Yeah, he was in Indiana. I was in New York. He moved to New York and we lived there for a time. That's actually where we started the murder sheet. And then we moved back to Indiana. So sometimes some of the early language of the show, people still think we're in Brooklyn. I'm like, no. we're in the Indianapolis area now. So we've done an old switcheroo, but yeah, long distance. We just are really, here's the weird thing, JSD, like we come from different backgrounds, we're, different demographics and whatnot, but we're really weirdly similar about a lot of stuff. Like we'll just come up with the same ideas sometimes, like our brains work in a similar way. And that's really just nice because it's like you can kind of get the other person and like kind of bounce off ideas and like have those connections. But sometimes it's bad. Like we're both really bad at directions. So like if you ever give us a map and say, hey, go to this place, it's going to be really bad because we're both going to be like, oh, let's go that way, this way.
Oh my gosh. So can you explain where did the murder sheet, where did that name come from? What did that all mean when you set that up?
Certainly. So we started off with Burger Chef, as we mentioned. We initially wanted to make a list of different fast food homicides to kind of get a sense of where does the Burger Chef case fit within that context of fast food homicides. And we ended up making this insane spreadsheet that I think was almost like 800 cases. They weren't all quintessential fast food homicides, but they were all restaurant homicides going back to like the 1700s, like tavern homicides in colonial America. And that was the murder sheet. And we started that before we even thought of the podcast. Kevin wanted to do the podcast. At first, I was like, no, because I was like, I don't want to be a podcaster. Like I don't know. Like I was just like I'm too awkward to like do that. And he was all like, no, we should do it. And like, so he eventually convinced me, and I'm glad he did for sure. But at first I was very much like, I don't have time for a podcast. So he was really the true father of the podcast because I was pretty reluctant at first.
So the cases that you guys had generally done were older cases, past cases, some of them cold cases for you to bring light to it. So is it a fair statement to say that Delphi was kind of the first case that you dived into that was like live in action, going on, active?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair to say, because even though I'm sure law enforcement in some of these cold cases will tell you, oh, it's not really cold, we're still working on it. Like a lot of times, as you know, doing some of your research, like there might be some resources put into it, but it's not a lot. And Delphi was definitely like intense media scrutiny, intense social media scrutiny, intense public interest, plus a lot of law enforcement resources. I mean, they have been working that case hard from the beginning, and it was kind of like a whole new environment for us. But we approached it saying like, how can we further the public understanding? Because even though there's been so much great reporting and journalism done, there's so many gaps because there's this culture of secrecy. So how can we pierce that to a certain extent?
Right. So then as I'm kind of leaping a little bit to obviously what our first kind of major topic that I know everybody out there wants to hear about, so I'm getting there, people. About the Delphi case, and about the leaks and stuff. And I guess the first part I'll kind of bring about that and I know this because I hear this from everybody, and I know you guys out there because I felt the same way. Although Kevin set me straight that they didn't do anything illegal when they released that Frank's hearing request. That was this massive 136-page document, which from a layman's perspective, you're like, well, wait a minute. There's a gag order, and there is a lot of stuff that the defense team just stated in there in that document. One at the time, this is before photos, but that a crime scene was being described, but also just their whole defense of what they were saying the alternative to Richard Allen was. Was that kind of what you guys got this as well, that it was an unusual Frank's hearing document that was filed?
Yeah, the Franks memorandum was very unusual, and here's what I'll say about that. It definitely did not violate the gag order in terms of the rules. The gag order just says, "Hey, you can't talk to the media, you can't give them information. You've got to let it all play out in the court system." And so it did that because it was filed within the court, and so they weren't breaking any rules in that respect. Do I feel like it maybe violated the spirit of the gag order? I think you could make that argument because it's like 100 pages of here are the odinists and here's all about the crime scene, and then only at the very end do you really get to the Franks issues, which are
Right.
really ostensibly the most important part of the whole filing, but they're completely buried. And so I think it's ostensibly a press release with some Franks issues at the end tacked on. It's a chance for the defense to put out their side of the story, their narrative, and I think, in my view, encourage internet sleuth to stalk the people they say are Odinists, because that's
Isn't
certainly
that a
what
little
happened.
shocking though, that I mean they actually name names?
Yes, I think that is surprising. Those men are constitutionally innocent as well and have not been charged with a crime. So I think a lot of people were really surprised that you're throwing their names out there into a volatile social media environment. Is that the most responsible thing? And it is surprising, and certainly you don't always see that. And there were certainly other options of people who could be like the target of, like, here's an alternate suspect who are either deceased, like Ron Logan, or who are incarcerated having done crimes of their own, like Kegan Kline. So there were other options for them, and I think it was very interesting that they chose to go with Odinism instead of some of those other established, you
I
know
agree with you because I honestly, that was one of the thoughts I had. It's like, why would have they not gone to one that was more so out in the media at the time, like you said, like a Kegan Kline, because of the Anthony Shots connection? Why wouldn't have they gone in there? Um, in my total opinion, and everybody on my thing knows what little bias I have. I admit my bias, but you also may not put anything out there that could potentially be connected or true, but that's just me.
That's one thought, and certainly just, if you think that one theory is more boring than the others and you wanna do the really flashy cult theory, maybe that's the one you go with, because maybe that really gets the public's imagination in a way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, for anybody, and trust me, if I sound smart, it's only because Anya and Kevin make me smart when I like, hey, I don't understand this. Help me with this. So the main purpose of the Franks hearing is just supposed to be that they're really we're trying to argue. If you take away about 100 pages, they're really trying to argue that Liggett lied to get the search warrant, and so that they want that search warrant thrown out. And they point out that they want, because it's got the bullet and the ballistics, but it's also would be anything else that was found at Richard Allen's home when they searched it, correct?
That's right, yeah. If you lose the search, you lose everything they got from the search, because that's the fruits of the poisonous tree.
Yeah. And the probable cause affidavit that the prosecutor, shared with us doesn't have, I know everybody's like, oh, well, there's only a bullet. There's only a bullet. they don't include every bit of information and evidence that they have out there. And they because of the gag order, I would argue that the prosecutor really has to make sure that they follow stuff like that and don't bias people. And Richard Allen being guilty, so they can't go argue what the defense said, because they can't go, well, no, that's not true because blah blah blah, or we found this, or there was DNA, or there was a phone connection, or whatever, of all the stuff that they took.
Yes, that's very true. They can't smack back and say, "Hey, how dare you say we lied?" That would be a violation of the gag order, and it would just be inappropriate. I would say that, in terms of the PTA, I think we were seeing the defense really hone in on that and try to dislodge it, not just from a Frank's perspective, but they were filing motions in limine to just throw out ballistics evidence as unreliable in general. They were citing law and cases in Illinois, which of course is not like necessarily super relevant to what goes on in Indiana. But they were sort of saying, hey, in some cases, people have found ballistics to be unreliable. Perhaps we should do that here. So they were kind of going at the gun from a number of angles, which I think demonstrates how important removing the gun was for them, because they were attacking it from all angles, which is what you should do as a defense attorney.
Right. Well, and I know from after our group had sat here and read some of the stuff, there was just information that we knew wasn't correct. I mean, as far as even what the girls were wearing. And I did a video of, here's the actual news Amber Alert description of what the girls were wearing. So this whole pant switch thing didn't make any sense. It's like, no, that's not right. That's not what was announced and what the girls and stuff were wearing. Now, if there was something altered, I don't know. All I can say and show is what we had at the time of the actual news story stating what the girls were wearing and everything from that. Um, so when we talk about the Frank's filing and stuff like that too, I don't know if you found it interesting or contradictive of the whole beginning, trying to get Richard Allen out of Westville was supposed to be originally because he was having mental health issues. But then we see a filing to squash all the info from that they can't get access to his mental health and physical health issues. They don't want them to see it, although that was the first reason they wanted to try to get him out of that prison. And then with this new document, it was about he's being threatened by guards who are wearing the patches of Odinism.
Yes, I noticed the same thing. I think a lot of people were very focused on the Odinist angle, which is understandable because it's so interesting, right? It's a cult, and what are they doing? What are they all about? But if you read between the lines and if you really look at what they're doing strategically, it's much more interesting, I think, because as you said, initially they're saying, okay, he's in Westville, he's suffering from psychotic symptoms. They described it as schizophrenic, which of course is a diagnosis, and they're not mental
Right.
health professionals. They're eternally, and they're smart men, but they're not working in that space. And we know that schizophrenia only very, very rarely, starts when you're that late in life. So they're talking about psychosis, seeing and hearing things that are not there. And it's all very mental health based. And we had so many experts on to speak about that. And I think a lot of people can understand that narrative, that perhaps if you are having a mental health episode, you confess to things that you don't mean, you say things you don't mean. Like, I think even if regardless of how we feel about the relevance and the accuracy of his confessions, I think we can all understand that narrative, because it's like, if you're having that mental health episode, maybe things just get out of control with what you're saying. Now, let's then jump to the Franks memorandum. We're hearing nothing about mental health, and suddenly it's alluding to maybe he was threatened by Odinist guards who are part of a larger Odinist conspiracy to frame him, to let the Odinists get away with it, which is like a pretty tall That's like that's a tall ask, I think, to like in terms of public credibility. I think people can get behind, okay, a small cult of Odinists did something bad, but once you're bringing in like a statewide conspiracy, that's a lot. That's a huge suspension of disbelief. And then troublingly, like they had a footnote in that section where they were essentially like, oh, he didn't tell us this, but like maybe it happened, who knows. And it was just like, oh man. And my reaction was like, they're not, I don't know, like you having a footnote in there is very telling, because it's almost like they had to put it in there because they just had to make it so that mental health is no longer an issue. And that's the reason why they had that, because it's pretty ham-fisted, to be frank. And no pun intended with the Frank's motion, but it's not the most elegant explanation ever. But it makes sense if you're saying like, we cannot let them get his mental health records because maybe he said some things that are not good for the defense. And if you're just looking at it like the most important thing is to keep mental health out of it, then it makes a lot more sense. And it's a lot better strategy on the part of the defense.
Right. Well, and I think that there was, the defense team doesn't have to prove their theory. They don't have to prove the Odinism to it. However, because a lot of people read that document and saw everything that they accused, there was a lot of people who took that as legit Bible. That's exactly what it was, what it looked like, what it all meant, everything from that. I gave it the description in one of the shows when I was a little upset and had to go live because of it all going on, where it's like watching, and I watch so many shows, I can't remember which one really does it the best, but let's say like a Dateline show. And at the beginning of Dateline, they are targeting you to believe that first suspect is the person who murdered his wife, for example. And this is why, and these people ask this, and they spend the whole first half of the show convincing you that that is the person it is. And you're like, wow, yep, it's got to be them, because look at everything that they said, and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden you break, and in the second part of the show they go, oh, but wait a minute, he actually had an alibi, and then she was seeing somebody else on the side, and she broke up with them, and then they're like, oh, wait a minute, now I know it's the second person in there. It's kind of judging the case based on only what the defense team is saying to you without proof that their theory is correct.
I think that's very important to note. And I think it's also important to note, like, they don't have to, as you said, they don't have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. That burden falls on the prosecution. So they don't need to, like, get Brad Holder arrested and charged. All they have to do is put him out there. And there were even interesting wrinkles within the document where they're like saying, okay, he's basically Charles Manson, but he does technically have an alibi for the time of the murders,
Right.
Or at least the time that would make sense given some of the timeline that's been broken down so far. And I would just say too, like, I think a lot of really smart people, myself included, I'm not saying I'm really smart, but I do incorporate myself in the group that, like, we love a strong narrative. We want the crazy thing to be true. And that, that very much comes into play here, because when you say, would you rather watch a Netflix documentary about like just some, ho-hum case with nothing interesting, or would you rather watch one where like, a cult is involved and all this wild stuff, and then it turned out, there was a cover up from the, like, you're going to want the one that's twisty, weird, wild, because that's going to hold your interest more because it's unusual. And I think one of the really strengths of the defense here was that they put a lot of thought into that narrative of what would really kind of catch on with the public. And we saw a lot of people, and, like you saw a lot of people where it would be like, oh yeah, I checked out this guy's Facebook. He looks really creepy. It must be him. And, we got a lot of those emails. And it was interesting because it was like, he can have a creepy Facebook and be some sort of Asatru or Odinist or heathen, and also not be a murderer. Like, those
Right.
two things can coexist. And people would just kind of go and get into the internet sleuthing zone, which is understandable. I mean, we've done that. You and I are the same way. We're curious. We want to see things. look at things for ourselves. So I'm certainly not criticizing anyone, but it can get into like a kind of like a, you're almost people almost kind of get this bias of like, what's the more interesting story? And then they're piecing it together based on like very limited information and drawing conclusions from that. And that's where I think it gets a little bit dangerous because, we saw something similar when Alan was arrested. A lot of people immediately were like, he's guilty. They arrested him. And we're like, no, like he's not at his time in court yet. Like, let's hear what he has to say. And then I sometimes think that some people have had a similar thing with the Odinists where they're like, they're guilty. And it's like, okay, let's all just chill out.
Well, and that brings up something that I want to clarify for people out there. Because you're a journalist, investigative journalist, I shall call you, and Kevin is an attorney, and the work that you guys do, you guys, which is great, and you guys don't have a bias in what direction things are going. You guys find the details, find the information, and you don't reflect a bias from that. So your show is not turning around trying to say Richard Allen is the person or Keegan Kline is the person or whatever. You are bringing details. And I would like to point out, not all details. You make sure like you have people who bring stuff to you. You have people you interview and you learn things about. I'm sure people off the record and on the record and all that kind of stuff. And there's stuff that unless you guys know it for sure, you don't bring that forward. But you don't have anything in the game to gain by trying to focus and make it on one person or the other.
Yes, we've really, and I so appreciate you saying that. I mean, it's funny. Sometimes we'll get emails where people are like, you're so biased. You obviously love the defense. You hate law enforcement. And then we'll get other emails where they're like, you obviously love law enforcement and hate the defense. You're so biased. And I'm like, I think that means we're in the middle. Like, I think that means we're, and that's what we try to do. Listen, Kevin and I have biases. We have our own opinions. We have our own feelings, and we're not perfect. So if they come out sometimes when we're discussing, we try to label them or at least kind of make it clear, okay, we're talking off the cuff here. So we're not perfect in that regard. I think objectivity in journalism is an admirable goal, but it's rarely achievable 100% in real life. But we generally try to approach the show where we're just going to give you the facts and we're not going to try to spearhead one theory versus another. And the reason for that is honestly, we don't know a lot of things. There's a lot of things that we are going to hopefully hear from a trial or the ultimate adjudication of this. But, a lot of times theories require you to almost like jump from thing to thing and like fill in the blanks. And we're just reluctant to do that because there's so much. But, sometimes if a case is like adjudicated, we'll give you our opinion, but we'll try to label it as such.
Right.
But we do have our own biases, but we just try not to lead with those. And in the case of Delphi, we don't want to condemn a man who has not been convicted yet. We also don't want to get into necessarily, saying that, oh, the case must be botched or must be terrible because we haven't really seen it play out yet enough. And so we're just kind of in a place where we're like, let's see how it plays out. Let's report on it, talk about what happens and kind of go from there.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to point that out because obviously I'm not a journalist and I'm a YouTuber who plays a YouTuber on YouTube. But so I'm going to have my bias. And because, everybody should be aware that Anya knows my bias because I can't get rid of the Anthony shots with Keegan Kline. I'm not, and I tell everybody, I don't know what level of involvement he actually had, but that Anthony shots for me, in my opinion, has to have some connection in there. We'll see. It'll eventually, maybe come out. I felt a little justified when I did hear when you were talking to Keegan Kline, although I think his second interview with you, he was trying to go back on a bunch of crap he said.
He was.
It was like, oh man, that's not what you said the first time. But when he brought up the Yellow app, I was like, yes, I knew I followed that damn yellow app for a
I
reason.
was thinking that. And listen, it's never bad to have a POV and let people know, hey, here's my perspective on what I think what I think is is happening. And you've done a really great job with that, because even though you have that perspective, you're like going with the facts, and you're also putting out information for everyone to kind of follow along why you think the way you think. If
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah. So let's get to the big meat and potatoes. The leak. The big giant, I don't even know if we can call it a leak. Maybe a flood. Let's call it a flood.
Yeah.
Um, so to fill in everybody here, so we're obviously we're talking about the crime scene photos leaks.
Hmm.
And so can you, and I almost thought I would need to start a flow chart on the side to be able to figure this all out. But can you explain how that information came to you guys, how it came to your attention, and then kind of what had happened, what you found out had happened?
Yes. So on the in the early morning hours of October 5th, we received images from a source we'd talked to in the past, and they included incredibly graphic crime scene images. And we were immediately like, oh my god, like we had no idea where this was coming from. We had seen previously that this person had also posted an image of a tree on social media, and that was sort of circulating. But like honestly, when I first saw that, I was like, oh, somebody's faking this basically. And so it turned out, this was a wider leak. And when the sun rose that same day, we contacted law enforcement and let them know, hey, we're aware of this leak. Here's what we received. And we also contacted the defense team that day, just saying, hey, here's the information. And so at that point, we had no idea where it was coming from. Pretty quickly, our source who initially gave them to us and who was part of this leak was, I think, feeling pretty bad about participating in it, and also feeling like freaked out, or like, what do I do now that I'm like part of this? Am I going to be in trouble? Asked us, hey, can you provide all this information I have on the leak to law enforcement, which we did so. And basically, like he said, in exchange for this information, can you just promise me you will give it to law enforcement? And so we're like, okay. And the information he passed on identified a person he got it from. And we're, out of respect for his family, we're only identifying him as R. And we're not going to talk about his identity because, again, it's a tragic situation all around.
Right,
But
right.
he, in his communications with our source, he gave, he made some statement that he also leaked it to at least one other person. So there's like a fork in the road as far as where these images traveled from.
So
he was,
the
mhm,
R person gave it to two people,
mhm,
correct? Okay, okay, I'm with
yep.
you.
And so where did R get it from? Well, we found out that essentially R got it from a man named Mitch Westerman. Mitch Westerman is a man we've actually interviewed before. Back in March, we interviewed him as part of our profile episode on Andy Baldwin, because he used to work for Andy Baldwin. And it was he seemed like a nice guy. It was just like a normal interview. Like, hey, what was it like working with him? Blah, blah, blah. It was not bombshell. That was the one time we talked to him. It was just kind of a casual situation. Never thought he would come up again in such a dramatic, awful way, unfortunately. But he, it turns out, had used his connection and ongoing friendship with Baldwin to access Baldwin's office and essentially get access to the discovery and share those with R, who then shared them with others. And now, unfortunately, because multiple people have had, have been shared with, a lot of people got them. A lot of people, I'm sure, are continuing to seek them out. We're very concerned that they will be published. It's just a disaster.
Mhm.
And it makes me, it's just been awful, because I just feel so like, I don't know, like it's not helpful for the case. Richard Allen has rights. I feel like they're violated by this. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I mean, putting out images like this that are so incendiary and awful, when you have a guy who's awaiting trial, that's not fair. That's not how the system is supposed to work. And in addition to that, it's devastating for these girls' families. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
it's awful. It's just it doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't help the situation. It's just bad, and it's just been like, this is the last thing this case needed right now,
Oh,
frankly.
yeah. So the associate of Baldwin
Mhm.
who accessed that,
Yep.
and um is it fair to say that he got it directly from Baldwin, or he just got it through stuff that he had access to from Baldwin?
So our understanding, and also our looking into this, we were definitely looking if there were any direct connections with either of the main attorneys, and we didn't find any. We didn't see anything that was like, oh, Baldwin's secretly passing me on these documents. We didn't directly connect them to the leak in our own research at all. I think with this guy Westerman, I think what is being stated as like the story in the filings that the defense have subsequently made is that Westerman was showing up to visit and sort of snuck in and took photos of images on his phone. And so he's operating in this space secretly without anyone saying, hey, go do that, right? That's what's being said on the defense side. That being said, I don't know what the prosecution thinks happened. I don't know what the investigation ended up finding.
Right.
And ultimately, if you have a breach of this magnitude, it's going to come down on whatever side allowed it to happen. It's not all about intentionality. It's
Right.
about, negligence, or were there appropriate precautions taken? Those are going to be things that are going to be like looked at in a situation like this.
So when you guys talked to law enforcement, you ended up calling the authorities, and the Indiana State Police were looking into it. And the reason, obviously, the Indiana State Police would look into it is because they were worried that it could have been a law enforcement officer that could have actually leaked something. And did they have access to something? Correct. That's why the state police were involved.
They were involved, I think, because we called them,
Okay.
because we were like, hey, and so then they had an obligation, I believe, to look into it. As for we did cite that when we were having communications with them, we were impressed because what you would worry about is that like both sides would just point the finger at each other and then nothing gets done.
Right.
But we felt the law enforcement official we spoke to over this, which was Jerry Holman, was immediately like taking it very seriously. He was acting in a very professional manner and was even like, wanting to investigate both sides and not just jump to the conclusion that it was, you know, the opposite side of the aisle, if that makes sort of sense.
Yeah. So what would be Westerman's intention though?
That is such a good question. And that's one question I don't feel like we have the answers to. I could speculate and I'll speculate, but it could be anything from unintentional of like I meant to share it with one person who then shared it with more people who then, and so you might have it just be like I was looking to like impress my friend and then things spiraled out of control. You could look at it if you want to like say, well, maybe the leak was planned or there was some sort of like intentionality here. We have not found any evidence of that, but I'm sure some people are wondering, okay, could this have been on purpose somehow and just got out of control? I think there's a couple of, but I think we don't really know that at this point.
Right.
And um, we've certainly not seen anything saying Baldwin was directly complicit in it or directly involved. But ultimately, the repercussions are going to come down on him and Rosie because they're the lawyers here. And a breach of this enormity is pretty serious, obviously. And one thing, a lot of people are like, oh, the images. And that is certainly like a huge part of it, the images. But in the communications we saw between R and our source, there was a lot of information passing back and forth about like defense strategy, things that R should not have known about,
Right.
um, specific details. And that makes it seem like this was larger than just one instantaneous bad decision by Mitch Westerman to go in, photograph Discovery, and leave. It makes it seem like it's more substantive.
Yeah, I mean, it also, you have to look at from the standpoint of who benefits from it getting out there, that
Yeah.
photo getting back there. And the only thing, and this is totally my suspicion, that just totally blame this on JSA. This is not Anya. I mean, and that's not her at all. But my suspicion of that is also because we have the document that's released trying to describe the scene, and then all of a sudden the photo somehow is out there. If a photo got out there and it went to like a tabloid that like paid thousands of dollars, then you know why that is. But when it kind of slides out from one person and then it starts playing the telephone game of when it's getting out to other people and getting out to, YouTubers and other channels and stuff for them to see in order to get it in front of everybody so they can continue the discussion of Odinism, which I think from the tree, people were like, they're not sure if it's the tree. You know what I mean? They're not, it could be any tree. You don't know if that's for real. But when they bring out the crime scene photos, that's a little hard to argue that that's not out there. Now, that doesn't mean everything that they said was true. I know that there were people out there that were showing it or talking about it and doing all kinds of stuff because it was just rumor everywhere about it. And I can't imagine for Abby and Libby's family that this is how they learn and see more details, and that they don't even have the right to say a word because they're honoring the gag order and not coming out and saying what's, debunk stuff.
Yeah.
Just like the prosecution, they can't say anything. They're not supposed to say anything.
Well said. And well said because, yeah, I mean, they're in a position where they've been advocating for those girls for years. And then suddenly they can't say a word when people are like acting like this on the internet. And like, if we say anything saying, hey, maybe don't look up the photos or don't try to find them, then we're being condescending. And it's like, I wish we didn't have to say anything. And obviously, if you're not the kind of person to do that, then it's not addressed to you. But there are a
Yeah.
lot of people who are trying to find this stuff and trying to spread it. And it's like, this is totally inappropriate. It's
So
not good.
let me ask this. Did R know Baldwin?
That's a good question. We've not seen any indication or evidence that R directly knew Baldwin.
But
Um,
R was communicating information about what the strategy for the defense team was
yes, which we
with your
presume
source who contacted you.
yes. And we presume he got that from Westerman. So Westerman's passing it on to R, who then passes it on to our source who gives it to us then. And it's yeah, it's alarming. It's alarming, and it's unfortunately a situation where R died by suicide, not long
Right.
ago when the investigation started.
Right.
So we don't just have families, Richard Allen's families, the girls' families who are affected by this. We have a whole new family affected by this, and they're heartbroken, and they're just like, how did this happen?
And
And
nobody is saying, no, I guess let me put it this way. Nobody knows the reason for R to have committed suicide. So it could be other things totally in
yeah,
his life.
absolutely.
Nobody's saying necessarily it's about this or came forward, but it obviously puts a very weird twist into everything that's going on, that you can't ask questions to him about, hey, what happened? How did this, were you serving as a middleman to get this information out? Were you, and to try to get that source and stuff, from that. So
Well said. Yeah, it adds to the mystery and unfortunately the tragedy because it's like it's just I don't know. It's so bad. It's just like it's such a bad situation. And I it you asked earlier, who does it benefit? I feel ultimately whatever the intention was, it doesn't benefit anybody. It just has made everything so much worse. You have now we're gonna possibly have a change in the defense team, although, we'll probably talk about maybe not. We've had some filings today, but it's just kind of like, it's just a mess. And unfortunately, we had a hearing on October 19th, but it was 3 minutes long. And so we didn't really get much information. And we were hoping, because we're big proponents of like transparency and like put the information out there. And we were hoping that the public would get some more answers at that time. And unfortunately, it did not happen.
So that was going to be this perfect transition. So you guys always go out to the court cases. And if nobody knows this, let me tell you that Anya and Kevin can tell you how romantic courthouses are across the state of Indiana as they go to them.
That makes it sound so weird, JSB. No.
I asked her how romantic Fort Wayne was.
I'm going to tell you all, if any of you are engaged and you're looking like, I want to do a courthouse wedding in Indiana, consider Fort Wayne, because it looks like a church palace thing. Like, it is the Versailles of Indiana courthouses, in my opinion. I hope I'm not overselling it, but it's like marble and all these beautiful murals. It's really impressive structure. So if you're getting married and you want to do a casual courthouse wedding, look at that one. And if you just want to visit it and do a historical tour, I think it's really cool. And I like spending time there, even though they don't let you have cell phones. So you end up feeling like you're in Vegas, because like time's passing and you have no idea what time it is. And everyone's like, what time is it? Waiting for the whole thing. And you're just under all these like beautiful like sculptures of angels. And you're just like, what is happening?
Oh my gosh. So fill us in. So you're sitting in the courtroom. How in advance did you have to get to this one? Was there a way ahead of time, or?
We are like anxious people. So we always are like, oh, we can go later because it's at 2 p.m. But then we were like, what if other people get there first and they crowd us out? So we ended up going, we got there when the courthouse opened, which was 8. And we sat in the hallway. They were like pew benches kind of situation. And, we're just talking with reporters the whole time. And lots of reporters, people from YouTube, people were kind of coming out to cover it, other podcasters. And then they put us in the courtroom. I think it were like 90 seats. And we waited around, and it was getting like later and later and later. And we were seeing like Baldwin never showed up. Rosie's like running in and out. And we're like, what's going on? And then eventually the judge comes out and says, they've withdrawn. And then it's over in 4 minutes.
It was shocker, because I remember I was like, a couple of cases where I'm like, should I go out to this one or whatever? And I was like, it's like, you know what? That's like, that's a couple hours drive. I don't know about that, but then after I saw that it lasted 4 minutes, that's when you're like, wow, I'm really glad I didn't drive all the way out there for this to happen. You never know. But
I'm sure a lot of the people who flew in who are from national outlets were pretty much feeling like the opposite of that. Like, oh my God, why did I come here?
So there was the filing that happened early that day, that Baldwin did. Now there was already, I already had the suspicion, because I happened to share, and this is before I even knew anything. So I didn't have any type of head up info. But I had a suspicion that it's like, okay, if there's something that's leaked, and I want to clarify this after I say it. If there's something that's leaked from a gag order, you can be held in contempt, you can be fined, all that kind of stuff. But I want to clarify the crime scene photos isn't a normal part of a gag order. It is, you don't show that type of evidence, period. That they don't have to make a gag order for you not to go show the photos of the crime scene out to the general public.
Yeah, it's kind of complicated, because it's like you would think, okay, that must be the gag order, but it's actually beyond that. The protective order, a protective order was put on the discovery material. So that means Judge Gull, Nick McClelland, Baldwin, Rosie, they all agreed this is under a protective order, meaning that you can't just like leak it. You can't just like put it out there. It's too sensitive to do that. It would hurt the case. It would hurt the defendant's rights. It would be a mess. And so what happened here was a violation of the protective order, more so than the gag order. And ultimately, that's even more severe because it deals with discovery. It deals with like the heart of the case, like this evidence. And
And as
yeah,
attorneys, they agree to protect those. They sign off to protect that information and that they are in charge of protecting what they have is not given out to the general public, is
right.
not given out to anybody. So regardless, regardless, if somebody's your friend or not your friend, and they somehow get access to it through your office, you and tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, you're still liable for that because that means you did not protect the crime scene.
Yeah, we've asked a couple of people this, and like people behind the scenes had conversations, people who've covered a lot of cases, people who have legal experience, and the reaction we generally got was like, "Oh my god, they could be fired over this. They could be, essentially removed from the case." So the people we talked to all seemed to regard it as quite serious. It seemed like the judge might have a couple of different options as far as dealing with it, but that at the very least, termination and sort of removal from the case could very well be one of them. And it might even be likely because of how serious it was. It was not a situation where it was a minor leak of one document. I mean, it was pretty substantive and therefore, you know, more egregious, I suppose.
So, I'll skip this question. I'll go to this next one first. So, let's go into what has happened today, and I will also encourage, and I'll remind everybody again, you guys are working on a show, so you'll have to guys go listen to the Murder Sheet podcast, who has about this whole stuff, which comes from the great that Anya really asked, helps us understand and helps Kevin explain it to us better in a layman's terms of, okay, well, what does that mean if you're not an attorney? And then Kevin kind of gives you the more legal perspective of, okay, well, this is what could happen and whatever. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. I wish I was saying I was doing it purpose, but I feel like I'm like, what does this mean?
No, I mean, you always ask the questions that I'm like, okay, I don't have to ask that. You know what I mean? Because you're always like, okay, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? So you always say it's Kevin. But so today, and we all knew that originally Gull came out, said Baldwin had, during the court case, had said that Baldwin verbally gave his "I'm leaving." I would argue the fact of it's kind of one of those save face where I felt like, like somebody's going to get fired from work, but instead of them getting fired, they say, okay, you can quit. So it doesn't look like we fired you type of situation. That Baldwin did that. And then Rossi was supposed to follow up in writing days later. Well, hello today, trying to cancel my show with the Murder Sheet. They file again that Rossi wants to stay and he wants Gull to be removed as a judge.
Yeah,
That is bold. That is bold to ask that. I'm
like,
just saying.
have you ever played Uno? It's like the Uno reverse card. It's like, no, you're fired.
Oh my God.
It's wild. We've been talking amongst ourselves since we saw this thing. And we were kind of like, it's a little weird. It's been a few days and he's not filed anything.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that hard to just be like, I'm withdrawing. Bye. So we were like, what's going on here? And then today, it it's not like there's not a lot of cases that you can even really compare this situation to. I mean, I'd love to find some. If people are aware of some, let us know. But I it's just totally wild, and we're trying at this point to just figure out what is the mechanism that happens here. Can she just kick him off, or is there gonna be another hearing where she tells everyone why she's kicking him off? Can he somehow finagle this so she gets kicked off? Like, I don't know. It's all very bold.
Here was one of my first worries is that if she was not during that day, if she was not going to get rid of them, my worry is she just scolded them and they had something happen to them. It automatically, if it was charged and found guilty, gave him a reason for appeal because he can say, "Oh, look what happened," and my attorneys released this whole thing, and then they released a photo and all of this, and that he would have a reason for appeal.
Yeah, that's the first thing I said too. So we obviously great minds think alike, because I was like, if they keep them on and he gets convicted, can't he just say, well, they were so incompetent that they were like leaking discovery material,
Right.
regardless of the protective order? So I was almost like, just from that basis, would it be, like, is that going to basically seal their fate for both of them,
Right.
And
Right.
so I was thinking something similar. Um, I don't know what's gonna happen, JSD, because I don't even normally stuff happens and you're like, oh, okay, here's how things usually go. But I really don't know how things usually go in this situation. I think we're kind of maybe not in uncharted territory. I'm sure there's other cases where this has happened, but it feels like we are because it's just so unusual.
Oh my God. I believe the term I used was shit show. That was possibly what I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. But well, and see, I think we're in the same situation though, because if Rossi stays, he still has a reason for appeal, no matter what, because Rossi is still a pair in that defense team that are we're working on this together, and even though it came through Baldwin's office or whatever, I just to go through all of this to know that you already can see a reason for appeal seems ridiculous rather
Yes.
than going ahead and starting it over again now.
Yes. And it's like, at what point are Alan's interests different than that of these attorneys in all of this? Like,
Right.
obviously, it's professionals, it saves face if Rosie gets to stay on. And listen, as a human being, like, I can totally understand, like, if, me and my work partner, if somebody messed up, I'd be like, that's not me. That wasn't my office. I didn't have anything to do with that situation. But at a certain point, like, is Richard Allen being best served by this situation? I would say no, but at the same time, if he wants these attorneys, I don't know. Like, it's such a hot mess. It's just like, you always think it's just gonna calm down at some point and it never does.
Yeah.
That's why I look like crazy with my hair today. I think I've just been going like, oh my God, like all day.
Oh no, there's no time for hair and makeup. I mean, I would need hair and makeup people to go. Let me tell you, this is normally how she sees me. I want everybody to know that this is how she sees me all the time. But
I like your
yeah,
little hat.
yes, my little fedora. I mean, I guess my other thought is what would be the reason to remove Gull? What I don't understand that
I
because
think,
it's
yeah.
not her fault that they leaked that out. You know,
No, it's not. It's definitely not. Here's their rationale, or here's Rosie's rationale, because he's filing this by himself. So Gull, basically, you have to remove one of them at this point because
right?
what Rosie's saying. So Gull is essentially, according to Rosie's filing, said these defendants are incompetent. I don't trust them anymore. I don't have confidence in them. And now that she said that, like, she can't really, like, if Rosie were to stay on, she couldn't stay on. And if she were to stay on, he can't stay on. So one of them has to go. He's arguing, oh, she's really biased against us. His reasoning for that is a little bit, like, it. I kind of see what he's talking about in some areas, and then other areas seem a bit of a stretch, to be honest. Um, I just don't. But one of them does have to go, because when there's that breakdown of trust, you can't just have them continue to work together, because then the fear that would be the judge would be just ruling against one side because they don't trust the lawyer versus anything else, right? So I don't really know what the mechanism would be to remove her, though. I mean, it's her. They were appointed by her. My understanding is it's her decision. So maybe this gets kicked up to a higher court and there's some sort of like someone ruling on it. That's my best guess. I actually have no idea, neither does Kevin at this point, but we are trying to figure that out.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I can see that there would be a form of bias on in there. How does she trust what's going on in there? With that same even with just half the defense team, and he's going to feel a bias no matter what because of what happened. I mean, that's why it shouldn't have happened.
That's why it
And,
shouldn't have happened, yeah.
but that she called him out on evidence of 2 girls who are murdered, whose family had not seen it, and for everybody to see it, I reiterate to people, we are not the jury,
No.
and we are not the detectives to go find out what happened. We talk about it, we share info about what happens and stuff from that, just like, you guys didn't go looking for that photos were released from the girls. It came from a source that came to you. It came from somebody saying, "Hey, I've got more stuff. Can you help by getting this to the proper authorities and turning that in?" And that's you guys just seeing that. Oh my God, this protective information, not gag order, higher level than that, protective information never ever should have reached the general public. And
Yeah.
honestly, I was even talking to some of my crew over here the other day, and I was like, you got to think about, even after a crime is done and we've learned the case, most of the time you don't see the photos of the crime scene. They
No,
don't
it's
release
ludicrous.
that out to everybody.
Absolutely not. I mean, we've been in a murder trial where they've shown photos of the body, but they didn't like then afterwards leak it to Reddit. I mean, it's absolutely preposterous to I mean, that was it's preposterous to act like for when people are kind of minimizing it and saying, well, we'll get out there and trial either way. It would get out in trial to the jury and presumably to the experts for the defense and prosecution, and that's the way it should be because it shouldn't be out there. It's just not it's not right and it's not fair, especially pre-trial for Richard Allen. It's just not how things are done for a reason. And it would be released to the jury and to possible experts, but it would be done in a way that's not just like handing out photos on the street to passersby, which is essentially what's happened here. It's just a mess. It's such a mess.
Yeah. So a question that I had, and I'm going to kind of word it like he did. Why why do you think that the murder sheet gets tips and leak information? Just reading how they worded it.
I think people trust us to act in an ethical and discreet way. I think that's why. When you have the Delphi situation, when you have Delphi people who are kind of covering it, there's a tendency for stuff to leak out immediately. You tell one person, then somehow everyone knows. And I think people understand that that's not how we roll, and they can come to us and we can talk it out. And we tend to get a lot of different information. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying, like, we roll and tell people and tell our audience and tell people we trust, like you, JSD, once it's appropriate, but we're never going to do something that's like risky to a source, if that makes sense. And I mean, I've unfortunately seen a lot of people who, just kind of like they get one thing and then they're telling everybody, and you're like, oh my gosh.
So do you feel like I mean, I first of all, like I said, I will brag for you guys because I know that, you know, if you guys don't have confirmation that something's correct, you won't release it.
Yeah.
And you guys, when you find out something, I know for different situations, you've contacted law enforcement and you've been like, okay, is this okay to go out and stuff like that when you try to ask for comments or
Oh yeah, the
stuff like
transcript.
that.
Yeah.
From any of that stuff. And I think that's why you guys have such a great following, because you guys have this two very reporter perspective, and I told them they're like the perfect couple. Reporter, attorney, again, that heart to heart couple of investigating, and it just works so well.
That's so
Um
nice of you. I feel like our adventures are a lot more sad and disturbing than fun, which is I love that show too. I think it's a delight. So if you're ever looking for something to watch, you guys should check it out
we
because
should,
it's
yeah, we
really
need to do a parody with you guys in it. I think
fun.
we should do one.
I can
We
get the
need to,
big hair.
yeah, there you go. We'll pop you out some 80s hair and stuff like that to go on and everything from it. But so, and okay, I'm gonna look and see if you guys have anything I did not ask. Go ahead and put a Q in front of it, or JSD, I don't care, that I can see it. I'm watching. Um, by the way, do you think that there will be a continuation of investigation about this leak further involving R and all of that, or
I have
no?
no idea what's gonna happen. I know that Brad Rosie's at least asking for a continuance for the Halloween hearing, so I don't know if that'll be granted. I don't know what like, it this Rosie fighting leaving is going to make things more complicated, I think. So, it'll be very interesting to see what happens next.
Yeah, that is just crazy. I
Yes.
mean, I've never seen so many twists and turns and,
Yeah,
you know.
it's exhausting.
Um, hello, Melissa. Oh, oh yeah, in Maine. I know the Maine stuff's horrible.
Oh, that's so awful, God.
And then right away they had the numbers for people that were murdered. That's just horrible. Okay, do you think Gil is going to dismiss? Oh, I think you meant Gull.
Mhm.
I know I have the same little. I got chubby fingers that do the same thing. Gull is going to dismiss Rosie.
I I I mean, I don't know. We're really curious to see how this plays out next. I mean, it seems like from what he's saying that she wanted to get rid of them. So how now that he's refused, is she just going to dismiss him? Maybe. But I don't know. We're in a really weird position here because we're just kind of like, what happens next? We kind of want to hear her side. What does the prosecution have to say? Hopefully, we can get some clarity in the coming days.
Do you think that? Well, you do think that will happen quickly, like her answer reply, or?
I don't know. I not necessarily, but I just don't know.
Let's see. Do you think Rosie will turn against the organism? Probably Odinism defense.
No, even in his recent filings today, he's kind of touting the Franks Memorandum as an excellent piece of legal writing that was celebrated and lauded by attorneys across the country. So he seems pretty proud of it, and he's probably going to stick with it, I would guess.
Oh my God, that's ridiculous. I mean, it's great, to write a book off of, maybe. That would be a great book writing, but sometimes the simplest answers are it, right? Not the more complicated Odinism, white supremacy, pagan
It's very complicated.
cards. Yeah, I can't even get those all in one thing here. Let's see if there's anything else. Uh, they're laughing at the organism stuff. JSD, has seen all of the communications and the CS photos. What is her opinion of who orchestrated the whole mess? This is your opinion.
My opinion. Okay, so for the leak, I don't know. I feel like I keep swinging back and forth, to be honest. So I'm trying to just wait until we have more information. If Rosie's fighting this, you know, withdrawal, then I almost wonder if we might get more information, as this kind of gets spelled out. But I don't know. I don't know if this was an orchestration or if this was actually just people being really stupid. Um, and I'm not saying it is one or another. I just don't know yet because we don't have like that smoking gun. And we just have a lot of questions. I guess we're kind of in the same boat as you guys because I'm just like, what is happening? If that makes sense.
Yeah. All right, Purdue, I must have missed. If you go ahead and ask your question here, I'll get it. Sorry if it scrolled past me. And why I do wait for Purdue to put her comment back up. I do want to very much encourage you guys to go and follow the Murder Sheet podcast. It is on Spotify, it is on Apple, and it's on the third one, isn't it? One other one.
I think it's on pretty much every major podcast platform if you want to check it out. Amazon Music, Google. I think it's on all of them.
Yeah.
Hopefully, well, as far as I know.
Question: do you think MW will keep his current position as ethics officer?
Yeah, Mitch Westerman. How will his life be affected by all of this? I don't know. I think that would be hard to imagine. because obviously this is a pretty huge ethical breach, but I don't know his circumstances or what exact repercussions he might be facing.
Good question, though. Very good question. Oh, thank you, guys, and thank you. Yes, I do. I want to reiterate and thank Anya so much for coming on. I'm so honored. They're like my celebrity crushes over here.
No,
I love it. I love it. And when I'm working on some case stuff and things like that, they're really great. That I will say, if you're trying to find out, you know, a case that was very near and dear to me, you guys have watched the Deborah Fulton out of Hammond, Indiana, the unsolved murder from that, and dealing with Freedom of Information Act and all kinds of stuff from that. They're really great source for that, to kind of tell you how to do that and what to go. And one, you've got to listen. They do more than the Delphi case. That this wasn't original. I think, wasn't it because of Kevin's sister asked you guys about looking into Delphi, wasn't it?
Yeah, she
That's
did. She was
originally
like,
how that all started.
she's really interested in the case, and she was like, "You guys should look into this." And we're like, "Okay." And
Yeah,
then
and
now
who
here we
knew,
are.
right? Who knew from that point? Because like you said, it's normally, not an active case, but I would say that you have brought so much insight and value to that. And I think that people appreciate that, there is a lot of research to do, and I've definitely learned that from you guys. I have a lot. If somebody saw the background research of a bunch of stuff, but it's like, I definitely have got from you guys. It's like, okay, I've got this. I found this. One, should it go out?
Yeah.
And does it help or not help? And then two, do I have enough confirmation that I would send it out?
Well,
And
we just so appreciate that, JSD, and I just want to say, commend you for the work you do. We're huge fans of you, and we just are. Your audience is always delightful to chat with, and we just want to thank you all for watching, and just again, commend you for the work you do, because I think you run an amazing channel, and there's a lot of resources here, and kind of taking people through some of these cases and these important issues that I'm just like, we think you're great.
no, I think that's so nice. That is so sweet of you guys, and I do appreciate that, and I really encourage you guys to go and listen to the Murder Sheet podcast. You will feel the wonderful warmth of their voices while you listen to them, and let me tell you. And if you can't get enough of them, which I never can, then you need to become a Patreon. And if you become a Patreon, you get like shows with no commercials. You get
Yes.
like a couple private, what is it, a couple times a month. And sometimes I make those. Sometimes I'm like, oh crap, I just missed a talk. But anyway, you get to go listen to them and talk to them and hear about the cases and ask kind of side questions. So it's totally worth it. It's worth from there. I think they undersell it, but be honest with you, because it's like, I think, what is it, like $5 a month or something
$5 for
ridiculous?
ad
They
free, and
I
then
mean, yeah, you need to get on this before they become the Murder Sheet Plus,
no,
because I'm just saying they need to increase the value of it, because it is interesting to listen how they do stuff, and then they investigate stuff, and always with integrity.
thanks.
Never to do anything to hurt the case. They don't do the stuff in their bias. Stuff comes to them, and if they think it needs to go to authorities, which they will always tell you during their show, if you have a tip, please contact the Murder Sheet, but please make sure that you contact law enforcement first. And that's why that works. And people have so much trust in you guys that
Oh,
I will answer that question for the person again. They get tips and or what, if you want to call it, leaks, because people can trust that they're going to do the right thing.
well, I so appreciate that. You're making me blush. This was delightful. Thank you for having me on. I better get back to help Kevin edit this.
Yes, you better go get it. It was only ladies' night. It was ladies' night tonight. So,
That's why I
yes.
was
Well,
so
tell Kevin I
unhinged.
missed him. I missed him much. And you did wonderful with all of the legal questions that we
Thank
had.
you.
So,
He's gonna have to go back on and correct me on everything. No, this was delightful, and he sends his regards to you and to everyone. And just thank you so much for having us. It's always a delight to talk to you and everybody. And thanks for your great questions to the audience members.
yes, yes. And definitely we got to get that dinner planned hopefully soon here
Yes.
before.
We're gonna
So,
figure that out. We'll text about it. But listen,
absolutely.
you take
All right.
care of yourself, and
Thank
thank
you
you.
so much, Anya. See you
Thank
later.
you. See you
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye, everybody.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. I hope you enjoyed the show. We've been trying to get it on schedule and then an off schedule, and then something happens, and it was so funny of all days again for something to get dropped for the Delphi case. Of course, it would be today, but she didn't want us to have to, um, push it back again that we were trying to do. So I hope that was helpful. And, I very much appreciate them because as I discover things and stuff like that, I share that with them and go through and ask, what the legal part and stuff in there is. And, they fairly go on all kinds of shows and all types of things. Not necessarily that they agree with some shows that they go on with of what direction they may be thinking, but they are very respectful, wonderful people who will go on and share their opinion and answer questions and let us all know that stuff. So um, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope that was helpful, and I hope you just love her as much as I do. She is just so sweet, and I appreciate you, Paige, Mama Bear, Kelt, Jinx. Thank you guys for modding for all of this. And I appreciate all of you. And please know I am not a monetized channel. I only love to do it because of getting subscribers that help me spread the word about cases and missing and murdered and unsolved. And as you know, the CSAM and predators, the trends of what's happening to our kids on social media, and the techniques that these people use. So, you guys being here is such an honor to me. I am humbled every time that I see people who are willing to come watch the show and be a part of it. And I wanted to have them on to answer some questions and little bit of accusations that were going on out there. And what we all should be in this for is justice for Abby and Libby. That is what we should all be here for. So, Ruckus, I'm not monetized because I don't want to deal with the IRS and keeping track of crap. I do it, I guess, for fun. Um, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I'll have them and stuff back on again. And, even talking other cases because they do cover some other really good cases. And I know I've talked to them a lot about the Oakley Snow case and some other things that I've worked on, and definitely Deborah Fulton. So, but I appreciate you guys sharing the video, sharing information, sharing about the channel, subscribing. Please hit that like button if you appreciated the murder sheet being on here. And um, and like I said, I'm humbled that you guys come and watch the show and you come and be a part of it. So thank you guys very much. And thank you for making sure that justice is served daily. Bye, guys.